Hello, my brothers and sisters. It is Sister Mary, and we are going to begin in the book of Exodus. With this video, I'm going to give you a little bit of background about the second book of Moses, which is called Exodus. Exodus is the title of the second book of the Pentateuch. It comes from the Septuagint, which is the Greek Old Testament translators. This word meaning exit or departure. It occurs in Exodus in chapter 19, verse 1, and in the Greek New Testament in Luke chapter 9, verse 31, Hebrews chapter 11, verse 22, and 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 15. The name Exodus fittingly identifies the greatest miracle in Israel's Old Testament history. The book of Exodus continues the account of the patriarchal descendants, now called Israelites, whose history began with Abraham in the book of Genesis. Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. Particular emphasis is given to the changing fortunes of the Israelites in Egypt as they endured slavery and oppression, in contrast to the favorable conditions they had enjoyed under Joseph. Divinely called to deliver the Israelites from Egyptian bondage, and Moses was made conscious of the fact that the God of the patriarchs was about to intervene to free the Israelites from the control of Pharaoh. The subsequent demonstration of God's power to the Egyptians and to the Israelites as well in a series of 10 plagues. And this culminated in the Exodus. Protected and guided by the pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, the Israelites, under Moses' leadership, crossed the Reed Sea and settled in the environs of Mount Sinai for approximately 1 year. Here, God's covenant with Israel was established, and God's great revelation was given through Moses, conveying the heart and essence of Israel's religion, transforming the enslaved Israelites into an independent nation under Moses, and represents one of the greatest miracles in Old Testament times. The mighty acts of God manifested through the 10 plagues and the Exodus were significantly interpreted through divine revelation to Moses. The Passover, which is in chapter 12, was instituted as an annual observance to remind future generations of this miraculous deliverance from Egyptian bondage. And this event is viewed throughout the subsequent history and literature of Israel as the supreme example of God's intervention for his people. The covenant between God and Israel established a relationship in which Israel was identified as God's holy nation. Through wholehearted commitment and obedience to God, the Israelites were to reflect in their pattern of living that they were God's people. And the Decalogue and the priesthood and the tabernacle were provided for their guidance toward the realization of this goal. So, the outline of Exodus is chapters 1 through chapter 4, verse 31, Moses the deliverer. Number 2 is the contest with Pharaoh, which is chapter 5 through chapter 13, verse 19. And then number 3, from Egypt to Mount Sinai, is Exodus chapter 13, verse 20 through chapter 19, verse 2. And then 4 was the covenant that was established, which is Exodus chapter 19, verse 3 through chapter 24, verse 8. And finally, number 5, the tabernacle for divine worship. And that began in chapter 24 of Exodus, verse 9 through 40, verse 38.